Welcome to Murder Road Trip. I'm your host, Haley. We will be snacking on peanut slabs and pineapple lumps as we make our way to Auckland, New Zealand to discuss the Bassett Road machine gun murders. Joining me on today's road trip is the host of the Kiwi Crimes podcast, Jess. Jess, can you tell us about your podcast?
So Kiwi Crimes is a weekly podcast that looks into the missing persons and murder cases from Aotearoa, New Zealand.
I'm a huge fan of Kiwi Crimes. In her latest episode, can't pronounce the name, it just reminds me of Moana.
Do you want me to say it?
Yeah.
Ara Moana.
Alright, so cue the Moana songs in your head. The latest episode was about a mass murderer, right?
Yes, it was. Yeah, in Ara Moana down in the South Island.
It's a very good episode. I really enjoyed it, and I highly recommend everyone else listens to it.
Oh, thank you.
Can you tell the listeners where they can find you?
Yeah, so you can tweet me at Kiwi Crimes Pod, or you can find me on Facebook. We have a discussion group called Kiwi Crimes Podcast Discussion Group. Or you can email me at kiwicrimespodcast@gmail.com.
Awesome, thank you. And thank you for being my road trip buddy.
You're welcome.
When I have a co-host, I usually ask them what topic they would like to discuss. Jess, what made you pick the Bassett Road machine gun murders?
My husband actually picked this for us. So when you asked me to come on, we were looking through the lists of the crimes in New Zealand, and he actually found this one, which I hadn't even heard of before, and I read through it and I just went, that's really interesting. There's some twists, there's some turns, and I just thought it'd be quite an interesting one to do together.
I'm really excited you chose this one. As I was telling you before, I really love anything mob related, and this sort of has a tie to the mob. I just thought the case was really fascinating.
It's really interesting. I can't wait to get going.
Well, on that note, are you ready to go?
I am.
We lost the station again.
Keep trying.
I'm safe.
If you would... Hold on. Let me try this one.
Stop. That's it.
Turn it up.
It was 9 a.m. on Saturday, December 7th, 1963, when landlord Eric Lewis found two bodies in his rental property at 115 Bassett Road, Remuera, Auckland, New Zealand. One of the bodies was lying on the bed, the other was on the floor. Both were covered with blankets. Eric immediately left the premises to call the police and to get away from the stench. When police arrived at the Bassett Road house, it was immediately apparent that the bodies had been in there for a while. It was summer, and the smell was unbearable. Police approached the bodies and found that both had multiple gunshot wounds. Police determined that the two bodies were those of 35-year-old George Walker and 29-year-old Kevin Spate. Spate was lying on the bed wearing just a white t-shirt and underwear. He had been shot 3 times, once in the left upper lip and twice in the chest. Walker was face down on the floor wearing a gray shirt, a singlet, or a tank top, and underwear. He had been shot 2 times, once through the right cheek and once to the back of the head. During their search of the premises, police found a hand grenade with the pin missing. They also found a lot of evidence leading the police to believe the house was a beer house, which is a place that sells alcohol illegally.
Later, the medical examiner believed the two men had died between 2 and 2:30 a.m. on the morning of December 5th. A gun expert determined that the weapon used to kill the two men was a Model 55 .45 caliber Riesling submachine gun. After hearing what type of gun was used, police became nervous. This type of gun was unheard of in New Zealand. The gun had to have come into the country via a returned serviceman or smuggled in and sold on the black market. Police were also worried that the gun had been thrown in the water near the house. Police had two theories in mind. The murders were based on revenge from another beer house, or the murders were the result of a robbery gone wrong. At this time, New Zealand only had an average of 8 murders per year. 2 murders in one day was astounding. To solve the murders, police began interviewing people at every beer house, gambling location, and brothel in town.
Born in 1926, George Knucklehead Walker grew up in Point Chevalier with his 3 siblings. As a child, he learned how to become a bookie while frequenting the racetracks with his father. Police were familiar with George. He was a nuisance criminal. He was a heavy gambler and a bit of a mobster, though not a successful one. He liked to dress stylishly in Italian suits and hats. He also donned a fake Chicago accent. George Walker liked to wait outside the municipal bus terminus and look for young girls who were traveling alone. Once he spotted a girl he liked, he would walk up to them and offer to help them with their luggage. When he was done helping, he would give them his business card and tell them he was a businessman who could help them find a place to live and a job. In reality, he would help them find a place to live and a job, but the women were forced to repay him in sex. In November of 1963, George Walker was evicted from his flat for not paying the rent. Because he was upset, Walker headed to the Shakespeare Hotel to have a drink. Although not much is known about Kevin Spate, we do know that he was a seaman who started frequenting beer houses after his co-seaman, Gary Wilby, introduced him to the underground world sometime in 1963. It wasn't long before Wilby told Spate that he was opening his own beer house at 37A Anglesey Street in Ponsonby. Spate was there on opening night. Spate once met George Walker for a brief time. While frequenting the Anglesey Street beer house, Spate began to think he could operate his own beer house in a better way.
One night in November, Spate was at the Shakespeare Hotel when he approached an acquaintance named Barry Shaw and asked the man to be his enforcer at the beer house he was starting. Shaw said no, so Spate looked around to find a different man for the job. He spotted a man he had met once before at the Anglesey house, George Walker. After talking a while, Walker agreed to be Spate's enforcer at the new beer house. The two met with landlord Eric Lewis and moved into a house at 115 Bassett Road on Friday, November 29, 1963. The two turned the house into a beer house overnight and opened for business on Saturday, November 30th, just 15 days after the Anglesey beer house was opened. The first night was rough. Not many people were interested in drinking in a clearly makeshift beer house. The crowd continued to grow over the next few days. On December 4th, 1963, the crowd at the 115 Bassett Road beer house was gone by midnight. No one heard the gunshots that went off just after 2 a.m. What led to the murder of George Walker and Kevin Spate on that fateful night? To answer this question, we need to go back a few days.
A 23-year-old woman named Mary Rapira was dating the co-owner of the Anglesey beer house, Jerry Wilby. This was the man who introduced Spate to beer houses in the first place. But after meeting Kevin Spate, Mary started having an affair with him. A few days prior to the murders, on December 4th, Mary, Wilby, and Spate were drinking at the Shakespeare Hotel. After observing Mary and Spate interact, Wilby became upset. This caused Mary to say she was leaving with Spate. Wilby grabbed Mary's arm and said he forbid her to go with Spate. Mary disagreed and left with Spate. Although she stayed with Spate for a short time, Mary eventually went back to Wilby on December 2nd.
Meanwhile, Ron Jorgensen, Wilby's right-hand man, got word that Barry Shaw, that's the man that Spate first asked to be his enforcer, had threatened a woman. Jorgensen contacted John Frederick Gillies and asked him to take care of it. Gillies got in touch with a friend who was able to secure a submachine gun for a man named Craig Curtis. Gillies headed to the Anglesey beer house with the gun and 20 bullets on December the 4th.
On the evening of December 4th, Spate showed up at the Anglesey house and asked if he could drink there. Wilby said, "No, you have your own beer house to drink at." The two had words for about 15 minutes before Spate left. But not before he told Wilby he had a hand grenade at home and he'd throw it through Wilby's front bedroom window. Later that evening, a telegram arrived at the Anglesey Beer House at around 9 p.m. The telegram was for Wilby, and it read,
"What about hand grenade? Signed, KJ."
By 11 p.m, Wilby was so mad he told Jorgensen to clear the house out. He needed to talk business. Wilby asked Mary where Spate lived. She said she didn't know, and he threatened her. Mary headed off to bed after a bit, and was surprised when she saw Gillies had a gun. It is believed that Wilby then offered Gillies $1,000 New Zealand dollars, or 728 American dollars. That works out to be nearly 5,900 American dollars, or nearly 50,000 New Zealand dollars in today's money, to murder Spate, and Jorgensen would have to go with Gillies to make sure the murder actually occurred. At a little past 2 a.m, Gillies and Jorgensen headed to 115 Bassett Road. Gillies banged on the front door for 20 minutes before Spate woke up and answered the door. Once Spate answered, the two pushed their way in and hit Spate. At this point, Walker had also woken up. The two assassins told Walker and Spate to get up against the wall. Gillies shot Spate point blank in the heart. Spate then got back into his bed with a look of disbelief on his face. Gillies then walked up to Spate and shot him through the head to finish him off. Walker was cowering in the corner when Gillies shot him in the back of the head. Walker collapsed on the floor and Gillies shot him in the head again. Gillies and Jorgensen picked up the shells, wiped the place down, and left 115 Bassett. On their way, the two threw the submachine gun off the nearby bridge.
Right after Gillies and Jorgensen left the house, Wilby and Mary arrived at 115 Bassett. Wilby told Mary to go check on her boyfriend, Spate. When she opened the door, she found their dead bodies. She panicked and covered them with blankets, and the two left. After driving for a bit, the two assassins wondered if they had closed the front door, so they headed back to the house and found that the two bodies had been covered with blankets.
By December 14th, police were hot on Gillies' trail. Two detectives showed up at his door and said they had a warrant. Gillies let the detectives in and watched as they searched through his things. The detectives took quite a few things back to the station to test for evidence. On December 21st, police began raiding the local beer houses. The raid had one purpose: apply pressure to the employees of the Anglesey Beer House. Police knew that the other beer houses in town would pressure the Anglesey employees to confess in order to make the raid stop. On the 24th, police started questioning all known associates of the Anglesey Beer House. On the 31st, police finally arrested Gillies at the Civic Hotel bar. On the same day, police took Jorgensen to the station for questioning. Jorgensen denied being present at the murders and would continue denying the murders.
Gillies and Jorgensen appeared separately for their first hearing on January 7, 1964. Both men were charged with the murder of Kevin Spate. The Crown did not want to charge them with the murder of George Walker because they faced the possibility of acquittal on both charges, leaving the Crown with no charges to bring forth. The pre-trial began on January 15th. It was closed to the public, and the press was not allowed to release the names of any witnesses. At the end of the pre-trial, which lasted for 6 days, both men entered not guilty pleas. The Crown was given 3 weeks to prepare for the trial. Although Jorgensen's attorneys filed a motion to have his trial be separate from Gillies, the judge denied the motion.
The trial officially began on February 24th. The trial lasted until March 4th, the longest trial to date. Within 3 hours, the jury had their verdict. Both men were guilty of murdering Kevin Spate. Gillies and Jorgensen were sentenced to life imprisonment. They were sent to Mount Eden Prison. Might be interesting for you to know that the reason why they were sentenced to life imprisonment and not death is because the death penalty had been taken off the table, like it wasn't in law, but only like 2 years earlier.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so they narrowly missed having the death penalty because it was on the books until 1961. Jorgensen's attorneys immediately appealed the sentence, but the appeal was denied. On January 17, 1965, a letter written by Gillies was published in the Sunday News. The letter read,
"The police and Minister Justice have got this whole thing wrong. Jorgensen didn't shoot those 2 men at Bassett Road because he wasn't there. I should know. I was there. I shot Spate and Walker. Don't get me wrong, I didn't go to Bassett Road alone. I had a girl with me. She's the person who should have been standing alongside me in the dock at the trial, not Jorgensen. I don't know why they won't give Jorgensen a new trial. This is supposed to be a country of justice. But for the record, I'd like the public to know exactly what happened at Bassett Road that night. On the night of the slayings, the girl and I had smoked some marijuana and drunk a lot of grog. We drove to Bassett Road in Jorgensen's car. We borrowed it from him. Jorgensen didn't know what we were going to do, and he didn't come with us. The girl drove the car, and when we got back to Bassett Road, I knocked on the door, but there was no answer. The girl then knocked on the door, and I called out. Immediately, I heard movement approaching the door from inside. The door was opened, and I pushed a gun into a man's stomach. Another man appeared, and the two men backed into the front bedroom on the right side of the house. The two men were George Walker and Kevin Spate. I went into the house, and the girl came in behind me. Spate retreated back against the wall, and at the same time, the girl smacked Walker in the face. Spate became argumentative and sarcastic and moved towards me in a menacing manner. I blasted him. He collapsed on the bed, and I pumped 2 more shots into him while he lay there. I've got to give it to Spate. That boy really had guts. He didn't bat an eyelid when he stared at the barrel of the machine gun. I didn't help him much. After I killed Spate, the girl said to me, "He's got to go." She meant Walker. Walker was looking pretty nervous, so I gave him a cigarette to calm his nerves. I let him smoke the cigarette, then I let him have it with the machine gun. The girl and I left immediately and went back to Jorgensen's house in Anglesey Street, Ponsonby. So now you know what happened.
On February 4th, 1965, Gillies and 2 other inmates overpowered a guard, took him hostage, and broke out of the maximum security wing. The inmates were all armed with sawed-off shotguns when they commandeered a truck and drove through the streets of Mount Eden. At one point, they crashed into a garden, then went into a woman's house and took her hostage. Police showed up, and the inmates asked for bottles of whiskey and gin. When the men got their alcohol, they put their weapons down, and the police rushed in. They allowed the inmates to finish their alcohol before taking them back to prison.
We're nothing if not kind in New Zealand.
I was thinking that too.
Yeah, this is not the first time I've actually come across a case where the person's allowed to finish their drink. We're very kind here.
I wouldn't be surprised if the police sat down and had a drink with them.
That possibly even happened, to be honest. On July 20th, 1965, a full-scale riot broke out in Mount Eden prison. The riot lasted for 32 hours, and at the end of it, the prison was destroyed by a fire. The Mount Eden prisoners were sent to Waikeria, where they were kept in brutal conditions. They had no beds and were kept in cages. They were eventually transferred to Pirimoremo prison in March of 1966.
In 1967, Jorgensen's case made it to the Privy Council in London. The petition was dismissed. Jorgensen was paroled in 1974, but was arrested in 1976 for attempting to sell marijuana to an undercover police officer. He was recalled to spend the rest of his life sentence. He was paroled again in 1982, but was arrested a few weeks later for a bar fight. Although Jorgensen was acquitted of that charge, he was sent back to prison until February of 1983, where he was paroled for the last time. Jorgensen went to live with his elderly father. So I have a question for you.
Yep, go for it.
Life imprisonment in New Zealand is different than in America, right? They don't just die in prison.
No, so life in prison, it's the possibility of life in prison, but it's really not, because there's parole periods, and so you can come up for parole. So there's another case that I was looking at, and it was a double murder, and the guy got out after 14 years. Even though he was sentenced to life in prison, you are still eligible for parole.
Wow, because here in America, when they say life imprisonment, they mean you're going out in a body bag.
Yeah, there's only one person that comes to my mind that has been denied parole again and again and again and will probably never get out of prison. But it's very, very rare.
Wow. On December 19th, 1984, Jorgensen's vehicle was found submerged in the Kahutara River at the bottom of a cliff. Jorgensen was not in the car when the vehicle was recovered. Some believe he disappeared, and others say he died that night.
Gilly studied technical drawing and became a qualified draftsman while incarcerated. He was released in the early 1980s, but was quickly sent back to prison. He was released again in April of 1985, but was back in prison in August of 1986 after an assault. Gillies was released for good in 1987. He currently lives under a new identity in Wellington. The submachine gun used in the murders of Kevin Spate and George Walker has never been recovered.
You can find more information about the Bassett Road machine gun murders from Scott Bainbridge's book, The Bassett Road Machine Gun Murders. That was an awesome case. I really enjoyed researching it. I think mostly because I hadn't heard of it at all, and just putting the pieces together of why these two men were murdered. I didn't really talk about this earlier, but when police arrived at the scene, they knew George Walker, and they were like, oh, this guy's bad, he was probably targeted, and they thought that Kevin Spate was at the wrong place, wrong time, but come to find out, it was really the other way around.
That's really interesting. I really like this case because it's a little bit older, and like you said, it's kind of like a little bit mob-like. It's quite different from anything else that I've really seen while researching cases in New Zealand.
I was also fascinated by the fact that Chicago mobsters stereotype had made its way all the way to New Zealand.
We get stuff eventually, it's just really late. So maybe it was like a movie thing. Maybe the movies were quite big at the time with mobsters and things. I don't know, that's just sort of a guess. But yeah, no, it's really interesting that something like this has actually happened in Auckland, of all places.
So is Auckland a city or a state?
So Auckland is two things. So Auckland is a city, and it's also the name of the region. So we don't have states, we call them regions. So it's both, but where the murders took place in Ponsonby, that's right in the middle of Auckland City.
Okay, awesome. So I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Jorgensen has always claimed he was innocent, and then Gillies wrote that letter saying that Jorgensen truly was innocent. Do you think Jorgensen was present for the murders?
I think he was probably there. Whether or not he had a big hand in it, I don't know, and probably I don't think so, but I think he was probably there, and the confession may have been written as a, I actually did it, he didn't really do much, so let's just say he wasn't there, so there's nothing to pin on him, instead of just saying, oh, he was there but he didn't do anything, which is then like harder to sort out.
I agree with you. I definitely think he was there, because I think what the police assumed, as in we'll be paying Gillies and then Jorgensen going along, I think that's true, because Jorgensen was pretty high up. I mean, he was the equivalent of Wilby, so I don't think he would get his hands dirty. I think he truly was there to make sure Gillies did what he was paid for. Gillies for a long time refused to admit that Jorgensen was innocent, and I'm betting that Gillies got a lot of crap in prison and was basically blackmailed into writing that letter saying that Jorgensen was innocent and wasn't there.
I think that's definitely a possibility, for sure. I think it is quite likely.
Do you have any final thoughts on the Bassett Road machine gun murders?
I suppose it's just saying again what I was saying before, that something like this with a gun that was like illegal and probably smuggled into New Zealand, and mobster style murder happened in little old New Zealand in 1960s. Like it's just quite hard to wrap my head around that this actually happened somewhere that I know. But I do think that both of the men were there, and I think that they both probably should have been held equally accountable, which they were.
I agree with you. I, of course, don't know the area, but I was really shocked, like I said earlier, to find that mobsters had made their way to New Zealand. And I just think that the story behind why they got killed is almost so stereotypical of the jealous boyfriend. And
yeah, absolutely. I agree with you.
To end the episode, would you like to play a road trip game?
I thought you'd never ask. Let's play.
Okay, so we're going to play Can You Guess the Definition of These New Zealand Gangster Slang Terms?
Awesome. Let's do it.
I'm highly amused by all of the names I found in the glossary at the end of the book, so I just picked out a few.
Okay.
All right. What do you think a blue is? As in, it's spelled like the color.
Is that slang for the police?
I would totally think that because it's like the men in blue.
Because they wear blue. Is it not? I'm
Right.
wrong. Okay. What is it?
I'm not going to lie to you, I was so confused when I read the book because the glossary, of course, was at the end. I didn't know the glossary was at the end because I didn't skip to the end when reading the book. And so it kept referring to a blue. And I was like, what is a blue?
Oh, is it a fight?
Yeah.
Yes!
It's also referred to as a stink.
Once you put it in the sentence like that, I was like, oh yeah, it's a fight, having a blue. Yeah, that's not something young people say. It's more sort of older people would say something like that.
Okay, and I picked this one because it means something different. And a lot of these I picked because it means something different in America, so I was amused. What do you think figs are?
I just know that they're a fruit, but I doubt that that's a mobster term. Okay, figs. Ugh. Guns?
That makes sense. It's prison tobacco.
Well, there you go.
That's so weird. Okay. What does fly kites mean?
Fly a kite?
It just says fly kites.
Fly kites. Go drinking?
That makes sense. It's to bounce a check.
Oh, I don't have a checkbook. I don't know what one of those is.
I guess you don't go fly kites very often.
No, very rarely.
Okay, I hope I pronounced this right. Fonged. It's Fonged.
Fonged. Fonged.
So I'll put it in a sentence.
Yeah.
It would be like, oh, I'm going to go out and get fonged tonight.
Oh, get drunk?
There you go.
Whoop, whoop.
I'm going to start using that. Hey guys, I'm getting fonged tonight.
Send me a picture of their faces, please, when you say that to them. That'd be great.
Okay. So this one I picked just because it freaking cracked me up when I read it. What do you think a grass fighter is?
Someone who... Is it someone who deals, like, grass? Like, marijuana?
That would make sense. But of course this term does not make sense. It's an illegal boxer.
Oh. Okay. Yeah, that kind of makes sense-ish.
Okay, so what do you think mouthpiece means? It's a slang term for a certain occupation.
Something to do with someone who talks a lot?
That's true.
Like a receptionist?
It's a lawyer.
Ah, they talk a lot. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, this one I picked, like I said, because it means something different in America, and I could not handle it. What do you think rub out means?
When you erase something?
Well, you're not wrong. It's to execute.
Ah, okay.
So I guess you're erasing.
Yeah, because when, like, you're writing in pencil, you rub it out.
Sure.
Like, we don't say you, like, erase that. We say you go and rub it out, like, with the eraser.
Yeah, in America, to rub out.
That means something different.
Okay, I just have two more for you.
Okay, bring it on.
Okay, what do you think swag is? And basically, it's an item.
Oh. Is swag a... Is that a gun?
I got my swag.
Yeah.
It's a loose pack or bundle containing personal belongings, which is tied together.
Do you know what? Now that you've said that, I actually knew that because when swag was a big thing, because I'm a bit of a buzzkill, I actually Googled what the actual meaning was, and that's what came up.
I love it.
So that does sound familiar, but I was never going to get that.
All right, last one. What do you think swish means? It's to do something.
To clean? You swish around?
Ooh. No, it's to harass.
Ah, okay then. You picked some good ones. I had no idea. I think I got like 0 out of 10.
No, you did a good job. I hope you had fun playing it.
I did. I had lots of fun playing it.
Well, thank you for coming along for the ride, Jess.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a really fun ride.
Until next time, please remember to check your back seats, and I'll see you at the next rest stop. I would like to give a huge thank you to content editor Laura Taylor for making my research sound coherent. I'm happy to announce a contest for everyone who leaves a review. If you leave a review in the month of August or September, you will be entered to win the Murder Road Trip Survival Pack. You can find more details on our website or any social media site. H.H. Gnomes and I would like to do something to help the residents and animals of the recent hurricanes. For the rest of August and September, you can send me $1 or more, and I will send you a sticker in return. I will then donate 100% of the proceeds to the Red Cross and the SPCA. You can send your donation through PayPal to murderroadtrippodcast@gmail.com. Please make sure to put your name and address in the comment section of PayPal. I will be making weekly donations so the money gets there before October 1st. You can find Murder Road Trip at murderroadtrip.com, on Instagram and Twitter at murdertrip, and on Facebook at MRT Podcast. If you're interested in continuing the discussion, you can join the Murder Road Trip podcast group on Facebook. Make sure to check out the Murder Road Trip playlist on Spotify. You can even add songs to the playlist. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to rate, review, and subscribe on your podcast app of choice. If you'd like to listen to the episodes before everyone else, listen to bonus content, and get exclusive merchandise, you can check out Murder Road Trip on Patreon. September's bonus episode will cover John E. Mill List. Please stay tuned after the music to hear from some other great podcasts.
Kia ora, I'm Jess, the host of the Kiwi Crimes podcast. Each week, I'll share a missing persons or murder case from New Zealand. I discuss cases that are well known, as well as cases that you might not have heard of. Some cases will be recent and ongoing, while others will be cold. Full-length episodes are released fortnightly, and minisodes are released on the in-between weeks. You can find Kiwi Crimes anywhere you get your podcasts. I hope you'll join me as I explore the cases that rocked New Zealand. Ka kite anō.